Welcome to this conversation with Dr. Keisha Siriboe, in which we'll be exploring how to make quality trauma care and the potential of post-traumatic growth more accessible to populations who usually don't have access to these resources, especially the global majority communities. My name is Jevon Dängeli. I'm a transpersonal coach and post-traumatic growth researcher. Dr. Keisha, thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge on this important topic today. Hello, it's good to have you with us.
It is so good to be here, and please call me DK. I am really looking forward to this conversation.
DK, that's great. Thank you. So, what I'd like to do next is read your biography so that our audience knows who they're hearing from today, and then we'll get into some questions and see where this wants to go.
Sounds good.
So, Dr. Keisha, DK, is a
Mhm.
globally recognized leader in racial literacy, equity-centered leadership, and transformational healing. As the founder and CEO of Dr. Keisha Cares Coaching and Consulting, she leverages her over 25 years of experience to partner with individuals and institutions to cultivate purpose-aligned growth and community-rooted healing. A certified coach with a profound passion for personal transformation, Dr. Keisha's work is grounded in her historic journey as a trailblazer, becoming the first African American to earn a PhD from the University of Hong Kong and a master's from Beijing Normal University. Today, she balances her CEO role with high impact positions, including Chief Equity and Engagement Officer for Masters Events at Oxford University and the Sensory Motor Psychotherapy Institute. Dr. Keisha's mission is to help leaders move through doorways of opportunity with clarity, confidence, and courage. I am
Mhm.
so excited to hear from you. So before we get going with some questions that I've prepared for DK, please note that we will be speaking on the topic of trauma. If anything in our conversation today activates you, please just remember where you are. So before we get going, take a moment just to explore the space where your body is right now as you're listening. Identify objects that are appealing to you in the space. And just attend to what's around you. And take a few moments to feel your body on solid ground, to connect with the surface or the seat below your sitting bones, and the solidity of the ground below the soles of your feet, feeling supported and held and nourished by earth. The solid ground remains, the space in which you are is there, and you can bring your attention back to this external space and environment anytime you feel triggered in any way. DK, my first question for you is, how should we understand or define trauma these days?
Hmm. Resmaa Menakem has one of my favorite definitions for trauma, and he really simplifies it down to trauma is anything that the body perceives as too much, too fast, too soon. And I'm pulling this out of his My Grandmother's Hands book. When I think about how that translates into now, right? Trauma can be anything you come across on your social media feed that impacts you in a way where your sensory overload says this is too much. This is overwhelming. And that is the moment, but the trauma is how you handle it in the preceding moments after. And so I am always fascinated to think about not only how we process the impact, but how we navigate, how we move forward, or how we regulate that, how we sit in that truth. Like that's where I think in the current context, trauma is the most profound.
That's a very clear answer. Thank you. So,
Mhm.
what I'm understanding is trauma isn't so much about what happened there and then, it's about what's going on here and now in the body and how
Yeah.
that's
How you
manifesting in our
processed
behavior.
it, how you rationalized it, what you told yourself as a result. Like trauma is a very multifaceted thing. But the part that I'm always fascinated by is trauma's impact on how we look at whatever that pivotal moment was, right? Like if, because I mentioned social media as my example, let me be even more transparent in this. So think about 2020. Think about, yeah, let's start with 2020. So 2020, we had COVID happening and we were surrounded by the numbers. I don't know if you remember that, but it was almost like the lottery. Every single day, they were telling us how many thousands of people had passed away. And they were showing us, the refrigeration trucks, like all of these things. If you are someone who was impacted by that directly, seeing that on social media could immediately send you into a space. And in the rawness of 2020, that is what was reverberating. And note the current, within a US context, we had an administration that was not handling this as well if it could as well as they could have. So there was no immediate sense of security. You simply had to navigate that on your own. Let's time travel a little further back. Let's go to 2017, right? When the Black Lives Matter movement was really ramping up and the world was enraged by what was going on. Well, at any time in that period, you could be exposed to the death of someone by a authoritative figure, whether it's police, whether it's someone who felt like they had the power to take another person's life. And those videos were put right on our timelines. And if we did not have the right controls, any moment you were scrolling, that could open up, or any sensationalized reaction could send you down that rabbit hole. And so, how you then process that, what you told yourself, if you were in a body of color and you were looking at the police killing somebody, you may be activated anytime a police cruiser gets behind your car. If you had the unfortunate um, experience of having to lose somebody during COVID, understanding you couldn't get to the hospital room, all of that grief, all of that comes right back up to the surface if you have not processed it, if you have not found your peace with it. And that's why I find trauma to be so fascinating, because we can all have that same experience, but experience it in very different ways depending on where we are positioned, how we have historically been treated, and what is our relationship with systems of power.
DK, that really strikes a chord. I remember these events so vividly.
Mm.
And, back to your COVID example, if I may, at the time, I was living in northern Italy, right in the epicenter where
Mm.
COVID emerged. And those military trucks that transported apparently dead bodies by the masses from hospitals to graves wasn't far from our doorstep. And I
Mm.
remember all of that. We didn't even need to look on social media. We just needed to look outside. And we all can relate to that through the experience of the time. And the Black Lives Matter example. Who wasn't connected to this in some way is somebody that isn't much connected, I might suggest. And so we're all feeling it to whatever extent we're plugged in to what's happening in the world and plugged into our senses. Nobody
Mm.
seems to be immune from
Mm.
the directly affected trauma, or at very least secondary trauma,
Mm.
vicarious trauma that's
Mhm.
going on collectively. And collective trauma is spoken about a lot by some
Mhm.
practitioners, such as Thomas Hoover. And,
Mhm.
when that goes on, whether we are directly impacted by the traumatic event or picking up on it through what's happening around us in the world, what do to a person's sense of safety, agency, dignity, and how might trauma care practitioners or coaches even be helpful to such people rather than causing harm?
I love that you asked that question after sharing that you were in Italy during COVID, because one thing Italy did that I wish the world would have followed suit. I think it was in the evening hour. Everybody would come out on their vestibule or their balcony, and they would start like some people might play an instrument and somebody would start banging a pot and adding into it. And so you had this sound of community. You had this collective experience that everybody was participating in that sent a message of hope, that sent a message of you are not alone, that sent a message of connection. And that is the unbelievable power of what also happens within trauma. And I don't want to skip ahead and make it seem like that was post-traumatic growth. But in the midst of trauma, you can still have joy. You can still have community. You can still have connection. You can still hear the sound of other people letting you know that help can be just as simple as banging on a pot because what they all collectively did was socially regulate. And that is one of the most effective ways to deal with trauma in the moment. There is a psychological term called emotional catharsis, right? And it talks about this immediate release, this big release that can come when you are in a space where you feel safe. Now, it is short-lived. This is not a long-term solution, but social regulation is a profound experience. And just so I'm clear, I'm speaking of emotional catharsis, that release as a temporary thing. Social regulation is a beautiful thing that has long-term impact, which is why community is so powerful. Let it never be misunderstood that community isn't a long-term solution to traumatic pain because trauma tries to isolate you.
Yeah. And in the COVID example, that's what many governments were doing, putting people into isolation.
Yes.
And whilst we understand their reason behind that, as far as trauma care is concerned, nothing could be worse, right?
Mhm,
We're cut off from that
mhm.
social community connection that you are referring to.
Absolutely.
This,
And if I answer the other part of your question, you asked, how do, coaches, practitioners, how do we step into these moments when we identify the fact that the client or the group that we are working in, trauma is very present? I think one of the things I'm sure we all understand is that we are there to be a listening ear. We are there to bear witness. We are there to walk alongside. We are not there to justify. We are not there to fix it. We are there to hold somebody's hand to the extent that they will allow us to encourage them and understand that you may not have hope. You may not see your way through this, but I do. Lean on my faith in this moment. Lean on my hope. And then we give them tools to regulate themselves and not be so afraid to face whatever trauma has turned that moment of impact into, because we have to go back. Like I tell my clients, we have to get to the other side of this. And in the simplest terms, a licensed clinician, a certified coach, your job is to walk with somebody until they get to the other side of that experience and find the wisdom that is the gift of that pain. There is so much purpose in pain, and that's a whole other conversation I hope we get to unpack. But that is the hidden, unspoken promise of any traumatic event. There is purpose inside of that pain, there is life-changing wisdom inside of that if you can get to the other side.
DK, I think you're speaking to such an important topic, and you alluded to hoping we can get to that at some stage. And I wouldn't want to, put that off in hope that we might or might not ever get to that.
Well, you were so organized. I didn't want to throw off your flow.
This is it. This is the nugget we need
Let's
to
go.
explore. So,
Yeah.
if let's just say, if I may use my own example, if I'm
Mm.
a
Yeah, yeah.
practitioner, I'm sitting with a client, they're presenting trauma.
Mm,
And as they present trauma, I sense the activation,
mm,
they're tightening up, or
mhm,
maybe they're
mhm,
becoming
mhm.
hyper aroused,
Oh,
and I can
yeah.
see that stress response happening in them through the way they're speaking, the way they're breathing, the way they're tightening up. Or maybe but they're becoming hypo aroused. They're
Mhm. Uh-huh.
disassociating from their bodies. They're
Mhm,
freezing. They're
mhm,
becoming quiet, still, mute,
mhm,
emotionally numb.
Mm-hmm.
for good reasons, of course. That's a
Mm-hmm.
coping strategy we understand well as trauma care practitioners. But if I sense any of these trauma activations, what would you recommend the trauma practitioner does in that moment so that they can maintain the health,
Yeah.
space, and
Yeah.
safety for the client?
Absolutely. So I'm going to touch on what I know our listening audience knows is that we have to bring them back into their window of tolerance. Because if they're in hyper arousal or hypo arousal, either way, they step outside of their window. Now, how you ground them should be directly catered to what you know about your client. Because if you have a client who has an issue with touch, who does not feel safe in their body, then you need to think about how you bring them back into the moment in a way that shows your care and your understanding of who they are outside of that moment. So they may be open to breath work. They may need you to just slow down in your tone of voice and just say, "You're safe here. I see something is occurring. I hold space for that." Linda Ty does one of the best best trainings and live examples of holding space for someone. And it could be as simple as your tone of voice before you give a directive. It is that compassion and care, that empathy that says, "I understand that we hit a deep truth." Because that's often what a traumatic response is telling you. Whatever was occurring, they either went deeper into their psychosis and experienced a lived memory that brought out what the body is showing you, or something that you said hit a profound truth and their body is responding to it and their mind is still resistant because they have not faced that pain. Their trauma has told them to disassociate or we don't look at that. That's how we stay safe. And so the main thing we have to understand once we get past the grounding is we have an opportunity to reestablish this moment as safe. And when I work with my clients, and I also coach coaches, one of the most profound things that come out of these moments when they're handled well is that it deepens the relationship between you and the client because you have seen them in a vulnerable moment. You have oftentimes seen them in an expression that they do their best to never show the world. And if you hold space for them in a way that not only says, "I see you, I normalize this, and I have catered my response to what I understand about you." Not a blanket response, not just a regular grounding exercise, but if you are in a coaching relationship, you should have picked up something about that individual in how you name like if you are taking them through a breath exercise and you are describing a scene, you should be putting characteristics in that scene that you know resonate with them. For example, they love water, or they have a great relationship with their pets, or they had an ancestor or a grandmother or someone in their life that has always made them feel safe. Invoking those memories in those pivotal moments lets someone know that they're seen. And that's the most important thing you can do for a client in a moment like that is let them know that they are seen and cared for and they are safe.
This just sounds and feels so restorative because aren't most traumas relational traumas? And
Oof.
here the practitioner is fostering a good relationship with the
Hmm.
client in the time of their trauma activation.
Hmm.
And what could be more healing than that?
And just think about that. For many people who are traumatized, who was there?
Yeah.
Who was there? That's often where the trauma metastasized into what it is now because they often had to figure that thing out by their own. Or they often had to recognize the people that they might have leaned on would only make it worse. And so for you to step into that moment and give them a new experience, that's how we start to heal trauma.
Yeah. This surely requires a huge amount of responsibility, awareness, capacity to hold space,
Mm.
and a high degree of competency and skill on the part of the practitioner,
Oh yeah.
therapist, or coach, whatever they may be. And,
Mm.
and they may not be a therapist or coach, they might just be a
Mm.
friend. parent,
Mhm.
family member, friend. So whether a professional practitioner or somebody else who's the recipient or on the receiving end of somebody they care about who's expressing trauma, what do we as the space holders need to do in order to really maintain the health space of safeness for these people who we care about?
Let's answer that question from an uninformed perspective, right? Because if this is someone who is a coach, is a clinical practitioner, you already have these tools. And so the suggestions I gave earlier was really about tailoring your tools to that specific client. But let's go further to the individual who just cares about someone who's sitting at a coffee shop or sitting in their home and you're having a conversation, and all of a sudden, this goes much, much deeper than you thought it would be. I want to encourage you by reminding you that while a lot of the research and the clinical terms that we are using around trauma are relatively new in the broad scope of medicine, trauma is a relatively new research field when you compare it to the other sciences and the other areas that we have. But I love this truth: pain isn't, hardship isn't. Like, we may not have had the vocabulary of trauma in the 14th century, in the 12th century, at the beginning of time. Let's go beyond before we even had these social hierarchies of race, capitalism, and let's go back to the caveman days, right? At any point, someone could die because an animal killed them, or they could have felt like at any point something could suddenly shift. You could lose a child. Things around the human experience, some of these things are ancient. Death, love, grief, sadness, anger, these feelings are ancient. And if our ancestors were able to figure out how to hold space for each other, you are well equipped within your DNA to handle this moment. As someone who represents an African American experience and socially presents as a beautifully dark Black woman, I have so much inside of me through my cultural experiences that is specifically tailored to deal with hardship and trauma. My church experiences taught me how to rock and sing long before I got to the research and understood that is an aspect of somatic therapy. My collective cultural experience of laughing and talking together, that was social regulation long before I knew the research behind it. But Langston Hughes talked about how we have to often laugh to keep from crying. That's not necessarily saying we're hiding from our feelings, but that laughter is the release. It is the understanding that my body is not meant to keep all of this inside of me. I have to find ways to process these emotions. I'm giving you examples that have existed long before we put together courses and certifications and tools and conferences and wrote books and monetize this. So even if you are in the moment and you don't think you have the tools, do you care about the person in front of you? Are you willing to give them a hug? Are you willing to hold their hand? Will you make them some tea? Will you hand them a Kleenex and let them know that you're present? Will you be willing to continue to listen without giving an explanation or an answer? Because sometimes people just need a safe space to unpack what it is that they're feeling. And let me add this to this moment of profound insight, because I feel like there's a listener somewhere that's going to start connecting the dots. They are actually paying you one of the highest honors of relationship by letting themselves feel safe enough around you to really feel what they're feeling and not put on a brave face or not put on a mask of productivity. They're allowing themselves to be authentically human in front of you. And that is a gift if you understand how to hold space for it.
Wow, that is so beautifully put. I love it. And there's another part or aspect to my previous question, which is if we are, as you put it, honored to be the space holder for somebody
Hmm.
who shares with us so openly and
Yeah.
freely. If we're not trained to hold space professionally, and we feel activated through their activation, and we're feeling ungrounded, and we're perhaps on the edge of our comfort zone and
Hmm.
maybe beyond our capacity to be
Hmm.
in space for that person.
Hmm. Hmm.
What tips or advice might you have for the average person who finds
Yes.
themselves in that situation? What can
Yes.
they do?
Absolutely. So, regardless of your level of preparation, in the rawness of the moment, you willing to stay in the space to the extent that it's safe. Like if this moment just happens, I am not advocating, I'm not prepared for this, so you get up and leave.
Mm,
I'm advocating that in the moment when this happens, that you be willing to ground yourself. Remember this podcast. Remember what you heard in this recording. Pull those tools. Take a deep breath and let yourself know that I understand a human experience. Someone, you don't need to know what the trauma is. You don't need to know what it is that is happening inside of them, but you can recognize that someone you care about is having a human moment. And you can make the decision that in this moment, in the immediacy of this moment, I will hold space for them. Now, there are different levels of pain, different levels of mental health. There are far more complex things that are going on. So do not think that you are there to be the end all be all of that situation. You are providing social regulation, comfort, and space in the moment. But the long term restoration plan or the long term understanding of how we begin to unpack this and handle that, that could be um, asking them, where do you stand or what are your practices around mental health? Is there anybody that you're working with professionally? Because in holding space for you, I recognize that maybe this isn't as simple as you think it is. Maybe it's more than you just getting out a good cry. Maybe there's more here than just you and I being able to have a conversation. Because while I am honored that I got to be the person to hold space for you, I am also going to be responsible in telling you I am not all that this situation is telling you you need. Your body seems to be saying that there is a deeper wound here, and it might be really restorative and extremely helpful for you to think about working with a professional, whether that be a licensed clinician or a coach, to really unpack everything that's here so that you can thrive or that you can be your fullest and healthiest self because there's a part of you that is holding back this energy so that you can maintain this balance. And I'm curious to see what you might look like if you were free.
mm. That feels like such a inviting challenge that we can offer, that anybody can offer to
Yeah,
those we care about when they are activated and trusting us to listen, to be
yeah,
there. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I like these questions. What else do you want to talk about? I like this.
Well, coming back to your expertise and your professional line of
Mm,
work, when we center the global majority, what
mm.
shifts in how we interpret stress and trauma, especially around family roles, community care, spirituality, identity, or even survival strategies?
Oh, yeah. The very first thing that immediately jumps forward is safety. For the global majority, and when we're saying global majority, we are speaking to the people who are in the world who do not identify or self-present as white. You are a part of a larger cultural understanding. And we call it the global majority because when we look at the sheer numbers, the majority of the people in this world do not present as white or identify as white. So when you are in that number, depending on where you are in the world, your understanding of safety can be dramatically different than how it is generally assumed in this mental health trauma space. I love what I do as Chief Equity and Engagement Officer for various organizations. I love the role that I play in conferences and digital spaces because engagement and safety go hand in hand. How I show up in this space is directly connected to how safe I feel, how strongly I have been made to feel that I belong here, and how critically has that message of you matter come across to me while I'm in this space. Was I disregarded? Was I assumed to be the help? Did anybody approach me as a professional, or did people only come up to me because they were looking for directions? Was I seen as someone who is credentialed in this space, or was I seen as someone who's here to help you get to where you're going? That very slight nuance, label, understanding can color the entire experience for someone from the global majority because oftentimes it is activating past experiences that they received in their academic studies, that they received in their professional jobs, that they deal with while they're navigating life. Again, depending on where they are in the world. And so I think about all of these things when I think about safety, when I think about how do we extract the most value out of this individual's wisdom? Do they feel like if they raise their hand, they'll be called on? And if they are called on and they ask a question, will we shy away from it because it is touching on the things we'd rather not say publicly, or it's touching on the things I don't want to be recorded on, or I don't want recordings of this to go out because I haven't done the work to really understand who's all in the room? Don't get me started on this because I feel my soapbox moment coming. I was about to take it to church on that one because safety and engagement is directly tied to how well we have prepared ourselves for the room, not just for who walks into it, but how prepared are the people on stage answering these questions to deal with the fact that it is a diverse community of experiences. And trauma is the best example of an equal opportunity employer. Trauma never discriminated. We can learn a lot from trauma in that regard.
That's amazing. You've just reminded me of something. Intuitively, I felt like having this book read, The
Hey,
Bryant Homecoming.
yes, yes,
This
yes,
is
yes,
your
yes,
sister.
Dr.
This is one of
Bryant.
my sisters. This is a gem of a book. And you're
Uh-huh.
speaking to what this book is about right now. And I felt like I wanted to have it handy just in case.
That was wise.
I have to also come clear here. I'm born and raised in South Africa during
Uh-huh.
the apartheid time as a white South African.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
lived in South Africa since my 20s,
Hmm.
but it's still my heritage.
Yeah. We talked
Here,
about this. Uh-huh.
yeah, you and I are having a conversation about inequalities
Mm,
and how that impacts trauma and how to co-create a health space. Yet we come, if I may, at some time in our human history from these split populations that were in
mm,
conflict, at least
mm,
in that geographic location. And I'm afraid to say, not only in that geographic location at the time, this is still going on.
mm,
And a lot of, as a trauma researcher, now I become aware that a vast majority of the research
mm,
comes from and is still being done by Eurocentric practitioners and researchers
mm,
that hail from Eurocentric universities. And whilst we're beginning to acknowledge the sensitive topic that you've raised here today, there's still a lot of ground to cover.
mm,
I feel that this conversation with you is healing for me because of
mm,
my past.
mm,
I feel called to be an activist, to create awareness about this very topic so that we can heal those historical divides and the present divides that separate us as co-inhabitants on this planet that is home to us all.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
What else do we need to know? What else do we need to do? What feels important right now to heal this?
I don't have the ego to step into that question and say, this is how we heal it, because there's so much that is in this space, but I can confidently tell you the area that I am actively engaged with, that I believe the most uh, fiercely in. I love that you mentioned academic research. I have come to recognize that another space that is in academia that needs to be expanded, that has to be widened, is how we treat our high level academic conferences. Who gets access to the stage? In our field of mental health and trauma, we have identified rock stars. We have our own celebrities within this space. And oftentimes, how they got to be recognized as celebrities, how they got their research funded, how they were able to coin these terms that are largely built on ancestral wisdom, on other spiritual practices, is because they were able to navigate their privilege and put a stake in the ground, very similar to colonization and imperialism. Now, I am not calling them any of those things, but I am saying they came to these levels of brilliance. They came to these publication opportunities within a system that was oppressive to great minds from the global majority. And so, again, like slavery, like every other thing, people who had that privilege were able to jump ahead and get on these spaces and have their names established, while similar people couldn't get the funding. Other minds who were well positioned and were doing the work never got the acknowledgement. And so they wrote their books, but they didn't get invited to these stages. And so one of the things I love to do within my current work is consistently expand the door. Consistently expand the door. In the podcast that I get to participate in, I'm always suggesting names, new voices to us, but seasoned and wise voices that have just been speaking out into the void. And so when I think about what are the things we can do now to start to push new voices forward or highlight and elevate different forms of wisdoms, I am always looking for how can I leverage social media? How can I leverage the ability to just talk with somebody? How can I turn that into content within my personal Dr. Keisha Cares brand and the organizations I work with? I have launched something called the Global Majority Social Media Campaign, and it is a profound outreach that I plan on doing for years to come. The first thing I'm recognizing is your barrier to getting seen on some of the stages I have influence in is directly tied to how many people are following you. How many people, if I bring you into my high level conference, who's going to come to that conference because they see your name? Well, one of the ways we grow your influence is by growing your social media following, but also in this wide, wild, and free landscape of social media. Anybody with a cell phone or a computer camera and some confidence can get up there and say whatever they want to say. Under my Global Majority campaign, I'm putting in front of you trusted voices, experienced voices, credentialed voices that are speaking to things that matter in a reliable and trustworthy way. And so we not only have this opportunity to expand the door, but we also have the public scholarship aspect of acknowledging other voices that are in the room and have always been in the room, but they were hidden in plain sight.
I love the fact that you're creating visibility and opportunity for those that haven't had these advantages in the past. It's finally time for these voices to be heard.
Absolutely.
This is such
Absolutely.
valuable work that you're doing. You spoke about if they have confidence as one of the ingredients toward creating these opportunities. And how are you helping people to step up
Mhm.
confident today within these roles that you're advocating?
Well, see, now I'm going to be telling some of my secrets because one of my powers is that I love the background. Like I am, I think you mentioned this when you asked me to be on your show. Like you looked into me and was like, "Oh my God, she's done all these things." You would never know it because I have enjoyed, like I have several TEDx talks that I've done around the world. I've spoke on stages. I um, set up the student focus group for the OECD. So I have several years of global policy development at the highest levels of education. I'm familiar with how government ministries work. I have a deep, deep understanding of power and academia, and I understand what education, influence, and privilege can do. I'm very grateful for the fact that I went to the University of Hong Kong and Beijing Normal University because that's when my world understanding of power really expanded. And with that clarity, I have come to understand that you can have the most impact and influence when you support someone. And that's probably why I love coaching. I have had the opportunity to be on stage. I have had the opportunity to have my name known, and I still have to find my way to get comfortable with this. I'm reminded all the time that I am seen as someone who is powerful. I am seen as someone who is influential. And sometimes I lose sight of that because that's not really the lane in which I live in. But with the power and the things that I can do, I understand that is also something that comes with it. But I have found far more value in lifting somebody else up with the platforms and the access that I have than putting myself on that stage. Because yes, I get that moment of spotlight and whatever emails and future opportunities come. But when I lift somebody else up, when I bring them onto a stage they wouldn't have had access to, or when I put them in touch with a mental health practitioner that they whose work they've always admired, where they go from there impacts the world. I'm thinking of specific examples that will remain nameless for confidentiality reasons, but I think about a sex therapist from the global majority who had an opportunity to spend time with someone that she had been following since her grad school years. And when she sat down and had dinner with that individual, not only did it let her know that you are that good, because you were sitting at the table with someone that you thought that your work could never be considered alongside. But here you are having conversation with them and they are validating your genius. Where that individual has gone now, they're getting ready to publish a book. They have taken off because the blinders have fallen off. The limitations of systemic oppression, trauma, conditioning, start to melt away, and the individual that emerges, and it's my thing. That's what I love to do with my power and my influence. That's why I care so much about expanding the door, because that's how we get real momentum in healing, because I'm scaling as I elevate, and I am activating other people to go out there into the world and use your brilliance and make the path smoother for the person behind you. That's what the civil rights movement taught me, and that's how I apply it in the work that I do.
I praise you for this important and timely work that you're engaged in and so committed to.
Oh, yeah.
If we can just, nearing the end of our conversation, I'll just pull this back to what you are seeing
Mm.
that the mainstream mental health and coaching conversations keep missing, especially when it comes to global majority communities. What might that be?
Oh my God. I don't know how I'm gonna pull it off, but I want to figure out how could we have a panel of grandmothers and grandfathers from various parts of the world talking about trauma and post-traumatic growth from the wisdom of their lived experiences, because there is nothing like the wisdom of an elder. And I'm not talking about an elder who has grown up in the research sciences and has 20, 30, 50 million books. I'm talking about the grandmother, the grandfather that lived through something, whether they raised a family or just looked after a village, sitting them down and asking them, how did you get to the other side of this? What did this teach you about life? What has pain brought out of you that you turned into purpose? Sitting at the feet of wise elders is the missing component of so many of these academic circles that it really blows my mind, because a lot of us got through trauma not because we read a book, but because we had an opportunity to talk to somebody wiser than us that gave us hope and encouragement in the moment, that then fueled us to go research it, that then inspired us to read a book. But at our base levels, at some point in your journey, it was somebody that cared enough to share verbal wisdom with you. And that is the part of the conversation I really want to activate. And I'm trying to figure out how to identify these wise souls. And wise elder, if you are listening and you are like, I am that person, Jevon is going to share my contact information. I mean this. Get in touch with me. And if you are not a wise elder, but you think you go blend in, you may not hear back from me, because I'm real serious about this. I am looking for the wise elders who really feel like I have always had wisdom, but never had the space to say it in. I definitely want to hear from you. And when I think about what's going on in the world right now, a perfect example of what this could look like on a panel, I would want to talk to elders that are living through what's happening in the US around immigration, customs, and enforcement, what we have shortened down to ICE. The way ICE is rippling through communities here in the US, it is the elders who are the best positioned to speak to how we endure and get to the other side of this. And so I would want to talk to the elders of these targeted communities and find out, what encouragement are you sharing within your villages? What encouragement are you sharing within your spheres of social influence that the world would benefit from knowing? Enduring a hard thing with no clear timeline of when it's going to end, that is what an elder can help you with. That is what an elder can help you with, because they have lived through decades of certain issues and they have insights that we may not have, and they can say it in a way that gets to the soul of a matter. So clearly I'm passionate about this.
And you're striking another chord. This feels so important. And how often do we, in this civilized world in which we live, put our elders into homes where they are isolated, coming back to that problem? They might sit among others of their generation,
Hmm.
but cut off
Hmm.
from functional reality and having an impact,
Yeah,
having the opportunity to share their wisdom, seen as wise elders in the first instance, because past a certain age, we're fit only for one thing, retirement.
hmm,
And unfortunately, that's a common thing in the world today. So, what you're bringing up for me is the potential of really actively engaging with those that have lived for decades more than I have and have stories to tell, have lessons to teach. If we could see them as such and make them feel worthy and create the space for that again, go visit the old age homes where the elders are silenced because they're not seen for the value that they could be sharing. And
absolutely.
create circles. You speak of a panel, and whilst I think that would be amazing to have selected elders come and share their wisdom to us, but what about the opportunity to sit in circle where they are, local communities, getting
Oh
that
yeah.
community vibe
Oh yeah.
going again, the way it always worked
Oh yeah.
generations ago? This
Oh,
feels like
absolutely.
such a lost opportunity.
Absolutely. You could take that concept and run with it now. What's today? Thursday at the time of this recording? Tuesday. Tuesday. Because I'm Ghanaian and African American. And so I was talking to my great aunt in Ghana. She's in Accra. And the wisdom oh my God, the wisdom that I received from that conversation has encouraged me in ways I can't even put into words. In fact, it took about 48 hours before I could even verbalize what I had experienced, but she spoke to the heart of what I was carrying before I even said a word because she has lived through similar pain. And so she could speak to it in a profound way. And so when I talked about the panel, that is very much how I want to expand the door. I'm sharing with you all, listening audience, how I want to use my power to elevate the voices of our elders. That is not all to say that that's the only way that it can occur. You could end this podcast right now and go call somebody and ask about where can I volunteer at an elderly home? Or if you are blessed to have elders in your family, you could pick up the phone and just see how they're doing, or even better, physically go by there. Bring some whatever whether it's tea, sweets, salty foods, whatever. Pick up some sandwiches or just sit there and watch a show with them and see what comes, or sit with them outside and see what comes. But there is such value and reconnecting with wisdom outside of yourself. And you're blessed if you can do it with someone who has a couple of generations of experience on their side that they can contribute to the conversation.
DK, drawing on your experience as a coach, where our main form of intervention, other than holding space for our clients, is to ask questions.
Mm.
What questions could we ask our elders that will
Oh,
help them to share their wisdom with us? Because perhaps they're not used to being positioned in that way. How might we support them to
oh
share
yeah.
their wisdom?
Oh yeah, you asked the right question on the right day. I stay ready with this because I am an amazing coach. So I would position all of this within the language of joy, because I don't want to start a conversation with an elder from a pain point. I want it to blossom into that if that's where it naturally goes. But if I am going to open up a conversation to someone, I don't know what your day has been like. I don't even know where you are in this space mentally. So I'm going to position myself to be in a conversation that's going to bring forward positivity, because that's the best place to connect. So I'm going to give you three questions. So here are real tools you can use in real time. The first question is, what brings you joy? What brings you joy? And oftentimes, when you ask that question, their body responds before they verbally do. Some people will smile, some people will take a breath, because you are inviting them to think about the last time they felt joy. And then inevitably, when they start giving you their answer or their response, there's an opportunity to hear a story within that. What brings you joy? The second question is, how do you protect your joy? Now, from a coaching standpoint, you are inviting that individual to think through, what are the steps I'm taking? What accountability, responsibility am I applying? Do I even recognize joy as something that should be protected? Or do I treat it as this whimsical thing that just goes and flows like air? Do I understand the value of joy? Right? And the third question is, what, if anything, tries to steal your joy? Now, that's where we can take the conversation into the mental health trauma space, because we're talking about the things that impact our joy, that lessen our joy. Any of these three questions, when asked in the order that I've given them, position you to not only have the conversation, but invite the wisdom of how they have protected their joy, how they recognize what was trying to steal their joy. It leaves natural follow-up questions in terms of, when you realize something was trying to steal your joy, how did you go back and protect it? How did you go back and correct that? What were the things that in life that taught you to do this? When's the last time you applied that? How would you do that now?
These are rock solid gems.
Oh yeah, and I gave that to you all for free. So Dr. Keisha Cares is a very real brand because I would have definitely charged for that in another session.
Thank you for your generosity.
My pleasure. I think you guys are worth it. So that was my investment in you all. If I gave you that kind of gem for free, and I'm a four-figure an hour type coach, so please understand, I don't take my wisdom lightly. Please don't do the same with that. If I put these tools in front of you, apply it. Use it. I felt like your listeners were worth that investment. So I put that full structure out there. I didn't just give you one question and, expound. I gave you a full tool set that you can apply right now because ultimately I want to see you thrive.
And you've given us such a wonderful take home. It's not just some advice, it's practical skills we can all start
Yeah.
to use immediately. And we
Absolutely.
can approach elders and we can start the conversation and we can use them with our clients, those of us who are
Exactly.
practitioners, and even
Exactly.
those of us who are not practitioners. When we're sitting with a friend and they have a difficult experience that they feel safe enough to share with us, we've now got questions that we can ask them to really help them
Absolutely.
access the resource of joy, explore the barriers to joy, and the ways forward.
Yes. And that's what a great coach should do. We should always end with something that invites them to move forward.
So, thinking about moving forward now, where can listeners find out more about your work?
Yes, thank you for asking. So, of course, you are always welcome to reach out. I have a website, drkeishacares.com. I'm very active on Instagram at Dr. Keisha Cares, DrKeishaCares, Dr. Keisha Cares. I do free 10-minute teachings. I try to do them weekly, but if my travel schedule is demanding, but you'll at least hear from me actively on Instagram. But another space that I love right now is common threads. Shout out to Masters events. I have the joy of being one of the faces of that platform, and I love the community that we're building in that space. So I facilitate a lot of the dialogues, a lot of the community conversations, and I am highlighting common threads as much as I am because I'm not the only face that you'll see in there. Common Threads is a community that is there to support licensed clinicians, coaches, everyday people that are just trying to live their best life. There are resources and materials there, but it's the global community that has me the most excited about Common Threads. So between Common Threads, my Dr. Keisha Cares website, if you want to work with me on the coaching and consulting angle, I'm available. I have so many ways in which I make myself available. Or if you just want a trustworthy voice to listen to amongst all of the chatter that you find online, again, I direct you to my content and the global majority social media campaign that I'm doing because I'm consistently putting names and faces and sharing. I am the queen of reposting. So if you follow me and just go to where I've reposted stuff, you'll be well informed because I love highlighting what great people are doing. So yeah, I think that says it all. And if you're just curious about, well, what are other great things that I can do? There is an Instagram channel. I think the handle is it's highlighting the monks who just finished walking from Texas to Washington, D.C. I fell in love with their story. So I would just put this out there on any social media platform. Type in the word monks and follow any of the content that has to do with monks right now because they are a bright spot in the social media thing. I know I'm supposed to be talking about me, but this is who I am. Like, even in a question about Keisha, how can people get in touch with you? What am I doing? I'm elevating monks. But that's who I am. But amongst all these things, that's how you can stay in touch with me, except for the monks. You're on your own with the monks. But if you do any of the other things I suggested, you'll see me in those spaces.
Thank you for your generosity, DK. And I want to shout out as well common threads. This is how we know each other. I'm in that community too.
Yeah,
I thoroughly enjoy our monthly gatherings, the way in which you hold space for all of us in the community, facilitate the conversations with experts who come to share their knowledge, wisdom, and expertise with us. You and I met in Oxford
yeah,
last year at the Masters Events Conference. I look forward to seeing you there again this year. And in between, we're hanging out
absolutely.
in common threads, and it's just amazing. So, thank you for taking the time to come and share your experience with us today. You've given us gems and practical skills, which we can all be deeply grateful for. In the description below this video, I will put the links to the sites that you have referred to. And I wish you well. I wish all our listeners well. Thank you so much. And I'll see you on the path. And I'll see
This
you
was
in
a
our next
joy.
meeting at Common Threads.
This was a joy. Thank you for having me.